things that keep your guts moving, which we can all do with a little bit of help in that direction, I'm sure. If you add any kind of nut milk to it, you end up with this delicious, unctuous sort of pudding type consistency that then has unlimited uses, and you can flavor that as a base. So if you consider it like quinoa or rice, it's a great alternative to any other carb that you might usually use. So, and it's a great way of getting a really good protein hit at the beginning of the day, rather than the oats, which are much more carb heavy but also slow release energy, and they'll keep you going during the day. But the other thing about them is when we're back out there on the road doing stuff and we need things to support and sustain us through our day, they're a really easy portable thing to take with you. So when you're traveling, if you're having to get up at strange hours, or maybe you've worked a late shift and you can't get access to the crummy hotel buffet, if you take a little pack of chia or oats with you, things that you can always get in a hotel are milk of some description, or at a pinch, fruit juice, and you can soak them in your hotel fridge overnight, so that you can always get a little sort of crummy little yogurt at the hotel buffet, or any hotel that you stay at will be able to get you a little bit of fresh fruit, a little bit of yogurt, some milk or juice, and you can make this up and then have it when you need it. So that's my little tip for travelers that want to avoid the insane hotel buffet, distractions, or can't get to it at the right time. Anyway, let's crack on. So I, last night, made my chia using the ratio that I used in the, I've got clatter and clang in my ears. You might want to mute yourself until you want to jump in. So I've got chia oat soaked overnight. It's quite a nice consistency, but everybody's preference is different. And also, believe it or not, I personally have found, I can't find anything online that says that I'm correct, but my personal experience is that white chia and dark chia soak up at different rates, maybe, and dark chia tends to take up the space much quicker than white chia does. So you might want to play with it. And if you're not sure about the consistency, put a little bit less than you wanted in the jar, and then you can always loosen it up a little bit in the morning. So that is my chia that I did last night with my sweetener in, which is, oh, nice. I can see someone's already done theirs overnight. Oh, gold star. I've got a little bit of sweetener in there. Obviously, you can have honey, you can have agave. If you're vegan, there are so many different options out there that don't involve any animal byproducts. Personally, I love maple syrup. Again, a lot of these sweeteners, as well as salts, are highly contentious if you're in any way ethically or ecologically minded. So go for the one that you feel is local, responsible, and sustainable. In here, I've got a little bit of maple syrup. And some vanilla. And what we're going to do is I'm going to do the oats, just so I can show you how I did it, which is my 100 grams of oats and my 200 mils of milk. I wrote on the recipe to use a scant cup, and I had a couple of questions about that, which so what's a scant cup? A scant cup means just less than a cup measure. It's a very American term. So I'm just going to stir my oats in, and then I'm going to pop in just the tiniest little bit of cinnamon, because actually my daughter's going to have these and she doesn't really like cinnamon. But what she doesn't know is that cinnamon acts in a very similar way to to salt. When it comes to chocolate, it brings out the chocolatey flavor. It's like magic dust. Anytime you do anything chocolatey, pinch of salt and a pinch of cinnamon, and it lifts it and sort of doubles the intensity of the chocolate flavor. I'm just going to pop in a little bit of, I actually can't open that. Oh, yes, I can. Phew, that could have been embarrassing. I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla. And then I'm going to make these oats, because they're for my daughter, I'm going to make them chocolatey, because that will be a real treat. This vanilla, by the way, there's another lovely chef who's doing amazing workshops all this week for the Exhale, called Tara Lee Byrne. And yesterday she posted the most beautiful video all about almond milks and the right timings to soak your almonds for. But she also talks quite a bit about vanilla and its origins and why you should use extract versus essence. So I highly recommend you go over and have a look at the things that she's been doing, because she's got some really great advice and information over there, and they're also on the Facebook page. I'm going to pop in a little bit of cacao. Now, I'm going to assume that none of you really know the difference between cacao and cocoa. So I'm going to give you a 1-minute lesson about that. Cacao and cocoa is basically exactly the same thing, except that it's completely different. So when you hear somebody say, oh yeah, no, that's raw cacao, well, there is only raw cacao. So cacao, by its nature, the name or word cacao means raw cocoa pod or raw cacao pod. Cocoa pod, cacao pod, it's the same thing. This is a very good brand, by the way, internationally available, I believe. I'm not sponsored by them, but I do like what they do. And I've got a little thing that they created, a little infogram that explains the difference between cacao and cocoa and how bean to bar is created. Cocoa is what we call the powder that is created by crushing the roasted cacao pods. So the cacao pods are broken down into nibs, and they are then crushed into a paste and dried out. That creates cacao powder. And cocoa is made by roasting those beans and then grinding them and turning them later into chocolate with the addition of all sorts of other things. So there we've got our oats, a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla and cacao. And I'm going to stir that up, and hey presto, chocolate oats for tomorrow. Very naughty, except that it's not, because it's raw cacao. And the fundamental nutritional difference between cacao and cocoa is that when you roast the cocoa pod, you lose almost all of its nutritional value, whereas cacao, you keep all of its nutritional value, which is anti-inflammatory. It also helps to lower cholesterol, and I am reliably told is even thought to help diminish any issues with memory. And so it can boost your ability to remember things, which, given the way my brain's going at the moment, cannot possibly be a bad thing.
Laura?
Okay. Yeah.
Can you use them interchangeably? So let's say you're making a chocolate cake and it says cocoa.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the cacao tends to be very, very slightly more bitter. So just be aware of that. And it tends to be slightly more pungent. It has a slightly more raw flavor profile to it. But once it's cooked in a cake, you almost certainly can't tell the difference. And when I'm cooking and baking, I almost always use cacao over cocoa. Okay, so we've got our oats going, and then what we would do the next day, in fact, what I'm going to do is pop those into here, because they're going to sit and do their overnight thing for my daughter's breakfast tomorrow. She's going to be so excited. Chocolate pudding for breakfast, who knew? And then the chia, if anyone did the chia, I hope the ratio worked out well for them.
I actually did half and half, Laura, so I'll let you know.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Absolutely no reason why not. And one of the reasons why I did that ratio kind of item right at the beginning is so that you can always go back to that. And also, by the way, at the end of this, we will, I promise you, post the recipes, full recipes for both. And if anyone has any issues getting a hold of it, click through to the Exhale, and Joanna Zen at the Exhale, which I think James can put up the details for, she can send through the recipes as well if for some reason there's any issue. So what I'm going to do now is add my my apple. Now with the chocolate one, I might not, so I cut myself off halfway through. So the reason I put those ratios up is so it's so easy to go back to, and they're both for effectively a 200 ml or scant cup of of milk. And again, any milk will do. No judgment, no, whatever it is that lights your fire, go for it. I've personally used, I like it, the combination of chia and coconut milk, I think is really delicious. And I often use half almond, half coconut. So then here, I'm going to grate an apple. Again, we've got a doctor here, and I'm sure she would tell you that a great part of the apple is the skin. So as long as you've given it a really good wash, particularly in these times, there's nothing wrong with that apple skin. Lots of times when we cook with apples, we take the skin off, but when we eat an apple raw, we leave it. Doesn't make any sense. It's full of fiber, full of roughage. Nothing bad's going to happen. Get it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and grate my apple, or thought I would grate my apple. It's a bit reluctant, my apple. So once your chia is soaked or your oats are soaked overnight, the next morning, grate your apple in there for a bit of added sweetness and texture. I picked up my daughter's grater because I thought it would be smaller and more manageable, but actually it's completely blunt. So the joys of live TV. It's coming. And if you're feeding children and they're not so sure about it, honestly, by the time you've got everything in your pot, they won't even notice anyway. But actually, it was my mother-in-law who showed me this little trick, and she often puts the apple in the night before. I don't, because I think it gives it a slightly fresher profile. But there's nothing that says that you can't add it in the night before. The only thing I would say is that it tends to discolor slightly. So you go ahead and mix in your apple, particularly lovely flavor with the cinnamon, and the vanilla works really nicely. And then we're going to spoon it into our jars. I love this tea towel. It's got Washington on it, Seattle, which I miss more than life itself. But there we go. One day I will go back, I feel sure. I've got very sweet little yogurt pots that I use for this. I find that they're really great portion sizes. Any old jar, any pretty glass that you have, anything that you can see through, I would strongly recommend, so that you can see all the layers of the fun things that you're going to put in there. I actually even have one that's completely adorable, which is in the shape of a little fox. I don't know if you can see that. Lots of people ask me, why heirlooms and wooden spoons? And the answer is fundamentally because I'm obsessed with old things. And that's a particularly old one that I'm very fond of. Anyway, I digress. Right. Let's get our chia into our little pots, and we're going to start building. And we're going to make the most beautiful Instagram-worthy little puddings. And there's no reason why you can't serve these at lunchtime, as a mid-morning break. As we discussed on Monday, whilst we might not all be running around like lunatics, I know some of us still are, but with most people these days at home, I'd fill them about just over halfway. Meal times seem to have sort of gone out the window a bit for a lot of us. But it's really important to just make sure that we maintain our sustenance, our nourishment. You know, I think the last few days, particularly for people, I was reading an article that said that actually, you know, the novelty's kind of worn off now, and people are getting pretty anxious. And I know in the UK and a lot of Europe, the weather has changed a bit. It's not quite so bright and cheerful. I think people are struggling. And so it's really important that we just make sure that our bodies are just gently, consistently nourished. I think really helps with mood as well. And all of these are very slow release energy things. So both of the recipes that we're making today are very slow, gentle, consistent release of energy. And because they're beautiful, they look and feel like a bit of a treat, which they are. We're very lucky to have access to a lot of these ingredients when many people don't. So we've got our chia or our oats in the glass pots. I have then done something a bit jazzy, and I've taken my yogurt and I've blitzed it with some of my frozen fruits. Totally optional step. If you want that lovely crisp white colour and that sharp taste against the richer, creamier chia or oats, totally up to you. But I've gone with a bright pink because I think it's really fun, and I also know that there are little people who think that's fabulous. And I'm just going to gently pour that onto the top. If you've got a thicker Greek yogurt, it works really well too. It might not have that pouring consistency. You can give it a stir. And the trick is obviously to try not to sort of drip it all over the pot. So I'm using a spoon that I know will help me to do that job. And hopefully you can start to see the colours coming through the side. Look rather fun. And then I am very, very lucky. I've got a little Italian deli around the corner from me, and lovely Max, who runs that Italian deli, is forever holding back beautiful things for me. And my present this morning was this. He said, Laura, any chance you could do something with those? I said, yes, I think so. So a lot of these are actually going to be dipped in chocolate and sent round to our local food bank, who are handing out all sorts of beautiful goodies from lots of local places. Tomorrow they're putting boxes together, so very pleased to be able to do that for them. So I'm going to choose a couple of the prettiest strawberries, which is actually quite a hard job. Those two look stunning. They are all the way from Italy, I believe. Possibly Spain. Fresarte. No, that's Italy. So I'm going to do something a little bit chefy, you know, just because I can. And I'm going to go 70s. Do you remember those 70s tomato roses? When are they going to come back? I feel like we all need a bit of glamour. I'm going to slice thinly, not quite to where the white is, but in a sort of striped fashion, all the way through to the bottom, but not all the way through to the top of the greenery, so that I can then give it a little squish and make it fan nicely. Look at that. That actually will probably only need half for each one. And then just because my kids are suckers for anything with banana, there we go, look at that. Very 70s hotel buffet. No, maybe it doesn't need a banana. I'm going to do strawberry, and I'm going to do a little bit of flaked almond.
Laura, can you give us a close-up on that strawberry?
Absolutely. There you go. Better? Or do you want a real close-up? Hang on, I tell you what, I'll show you the close-up when we've got everything in. And then I've got something magical.
I just want all the showy-offy stuff.
All the showy-offy, chefy stuff coming your way, my friend. Then we've got Bee Pollen, which I'm a huge, huge fan of. I like to use a local one. This is actually given to me by the guy who makes it, and I know that he looks after his bees very, very, very well and with much kindness. I'm going to come over here and do that. What do you think? Pretty, pretty? One of the other things that is really lovely to do as well, which I haven't got any blueberries at the moment. You know, lots of us are struggling to find certain ingredients, but another really fun chefy tip is when you've put your chia in, so you've got your thicker consistency item, just poke a couple of blueberries or even melon. If you've got a melon baller, you can melon ball out some dragon fruit or even cut slices of star fruit and slide it down the inside of the glass, between the glass and then the chia or the oats will hold it against the glass before you pour on your yogurt. That looks particularly chefy glam, but for now 70s styly strawberry will have to do. Desperate times, right? So there's your pretty overnight oats done. And now what we're going to do is head over to our second recipe, which is for our love bombs. I'm going to move these little bits and pieces out of the way so that you've got a nice clear shot of me without too much. I'm anally retentive, obviously, chef, clean as you go. So the recipe for these love bombs was actually originally developed by a lady called Ella, who is better known as Deliciously Ella. She's also the daughter of the Sainsbury's family, and had terrible issues growing up. Was constantly in pain and really struggled, and went completely vegan and cut out all sorts of things. And she has found it to be absolutely life-changing. Again, I'm certainly not vegan, but I do think that there are so many things that we can learn from her journey and her experiences, and it's lovely to watch how she's gone from somebody who honestly sometimes just could not get out of bed, and she now has this incredible business. So I'm very pleased for her, and these are one of her top selling items. I've tweaked it very slightly, but there's almost no need to. The recipe is sold by the million all over the world, but even she would say that making them fresh is a different deal to the ones that you can buy everywhere now in the world, in her very lovely sustainable blue packaging. So what we're going to do is gather together your ingredients. So we've got dates. These are medjool dates, which are one of nature's golden gifts, as far as I'm concerned. There are actually 1,500 different types of dates in the world, but medjool dates are highly prized for two reasons. One, because they tend to be much softer than the Nero dates, which are the slightly darker ones. Medjool dates are much stickier. They're slightly caramel flavored in profile, and you sometimes will see that they've got a little bit of white on the outside. Don't worry, that's just the sugar crystallizing. And lots of people don't realize that dates are a fresh fruit. These are not dried. A date, when you buy it in the supermarket, is simply the ripe fruit. Technically, you should therefore, in order to preserve its longevity and freshness, keep it in the fridge or even freeze it. I can highly recommend, as a therapeutic activity, when you buy a packet of dates, pit the dates, take all of the pips out, pop them in a Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer. And then they're ready to use as and when you want them. A great snack as well that I sometimes give my kids is if you split them open, having taken the pip out, put a little bit of pip and nut peanut butter in there. Absolutely delicious sort of fuel bomb before the kids go out to a swimming lesson or before you go for a run or when you get back. Really delicious. But so medjool dates, which originally came from Morocco, we believe, thousands of years ago. We have medjool dates being referred to in texts, and they've now in the 40s they brought them over to California, and now one of the largest medjool date providers is America. So they're everywhere. Date palms in Nevada, Arizona, across the middle kind of warmer states, and then obviously of course in the Middle East there's a lot. But so medjool dates are phenomenal. They've got quite a low glycemic sugar index, which is quite an interesting fact for some people. It's a slow release sugar. It's completely natural sugar, and they're just delicious. So you've got 100 grams of those. Now I've got, does anybody have whole almonds, or they've got ground almonds? I'm going to assume that you've got, if you've got whole almonds, get them in your mixer first to grind them up. If you haven't, go ahead and add your ground almonds to your medjool dates once they have blitzed. So I'm going to get my dates in. I think in my recipe it says to cut them in half. It doesn't matter, it's fine. And you can use a Magimix, a Thermomix, a stick blender or immersion blender, as we call it in the US. And then add it to your dates 1.5 tablespoons of almond butter. Now you could use, I got asked, could you use peanut butter? Absolutely. Ideally a smooth nut butter, or you may end up with little tiny lumps that aren't captured if you don't have a very powerful blender. And then the recipe calls for coconut oil, which is definitely the best option in this. Unfortunately, I don't have access to coconut oil at the moment, so I'm going to use sunflower oil. Any vegetable oil that's light tasting is fine. This is rapeseed oil. It's a virgin cold pressed rapeseed oil, which is a great substitute. It's not too much flavor. And then I've got my raw cacao. I'm going to hang on to that for a minute, and I'm going to put that once I've blended my oils and my dates. So apologies for the noise, but we'll get them blitzed up. Now, anyone that was with me on Monday heard about my horrendous accident with an exploding mixer that had too much liquid in it when I blitzed dates the other day, and I ended up wearing most of my recipe rather than blending it. But so I'll attempt not to do that on live TV again. So that's starting to look kind of well chopped, but not completely pureed yet. And the consistency that I'm looking for is a little bit more of a puree. I'm going to put in my cacao at this point, which will dry the mixture up a little bit and might help to puree it a little bit more fine, a little bit smoother. I can see that it's starting to gather, which is what I'm looking for. And now I'm going to add so I've now got this lovely, unctuous, thick mixture. I'm now going to add my almonds, and don't worry about it drying up too much. We can always add a little bit more moisture if necessary in the form of oil or nut butter. I don't think we'll need to. This recipe has not ever let me down. Can't believe I just said that out loud, but there we go. Talk about tempting fate. So as I said, if you've got whole almonds, just do the whole almonds first. If you've got ground almonds, do them second and add them in as I've done here. And then the oil from the nuts will release as well as it becomes warm and blitzed in the machine. I'm going to watch and see as it gathers up around the side and make sure that it's captured all of the little bits and pieces around the side. So we'll just do a little wipe down on the inside of the blender too. There we go. Just going to make sure that we've got all, every mixer that you use, unless sometimes with an immersion mixer, which by the way, I think is the most fabulous tool. I use it almost on a daily basis. I couldn't live without my stick blender. But with almost all mixers, you end up with a little bit either stuck to the bottom or stuck to the side. And it's always good to try and make sure that's amalgamated so that it doesn't end up showing up in your final mix. So I'm going to do one last blast. Sorry, it's deeply boring watching someone mixing, but there you go. Okay. And now for the fun. The mixture that you've got in here should feel as though it will come together quite nicely and easily in your hand. You should be able to squash that and make a nice sort of, it should be thicker than a paste, but easily have it come together in your hand. And it might even feel slightly warm from the blending. Now you can make these whatever size you like. I feel as though something that's sort of 2 bites, kind of canapé size, is really nice. And then I'm going to show you why I've ended up calling them love bombs. So you can turn them into balls, no judgment. You can make them whatever shape you like. We used to, when we were in the States, we used to call them hockey pucks, because I would make them sort of puck shaped, so round, and then give them a little squash. But balls are just fine too. But here, we like a heart shape. Spread the love, right? And then you'll find that they are quite soft. One of the reasons why coconut oil is a really great addition is that it helps them to firm up when you put them in the fridge. So you can put these in the fridge for an hour or even in the freezer, just for a little while to help them set up. But if you don't have that luxury, just leaving them aside for a couple of hours will mean that they set up nicely. But I have to admit that in our house, they don't tend to last very long. The kids don't know I'm making these today, so I might get away with actually getting in the freezer for a change. But yeah, I'd say that those should make, you should be able to make approximately 6, between 4 and 6 of these. They last a really long time. If you put them in an airtight container, they'll last at least a couple of weeks. If you put them in the fridge, they'll last longer. And if you put them in the freezer, they'll last even longer.
Laura,
yeah.
So, Rudy can have peanuts, but not tree nuts. So
Yep.
could I substitute oats instead of the ground almonds and then use peanut butter?
I would definitely give it a go. So I haven't ever tried to do that. What I would do is grind the oats.
Okay.
I would definitely grind the oats. So, and there's my second one. Yeah, I would grind the oats. I don't see why it wouldn't work, you know. I think that would be fine. I think that's a lovely idea, and there's no reason why peanut butter wouldn't work. I use almond butter just because I like that flavor. Peanut can be a little bit overpowering of all of the other things, but cacao and peanut's delicious. Who doesn't like chocolate and peanut? Oh my God, now all I can think about is the Reese's peanut butter cups. You could make these as sort of mini Reese's love bombs. You could have invented a whole new recipe. Brilliant. Shall I show you my my crazy bomb idea? I actually had these. Here you go, my third one. So yeah, I think I'll get at least 4, maybe 5 of these out of here. And they're really portable. You know, one of the reasons, again, why I thought this would be a good recipe to share is that when you're on the road as a musician particularly, but, you know, for the rest of us in everyday life, running around like lunatics, having little things in your bag that you can munch on that aren't refined, aren't too processed, aren't going to cost you or mean that you've got to run into a shop. Having these little things to hand are lifesavers, and I almost always have a sort of secret stash of these in the car or in my handbag. But look, so I did originally make a sort of bomb shape and then stuck a little piece of date in the top, which looks like a completely adorable little apple. But not so much the bomb that I was going for. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. So a short and sweet one today. On Friday is the third of our 3 classes where we're going to be making some really fun things. I'm going to do a demonstration of what I refer to as emergency soup, which is a soup that you can make in 5 minutes flat, I promise you. And just at the moment when everyone actually is starting to get the occasional moment where they feel like they are absolutely sick of cooking for everybody or even themselves. This is a really quick and easy, nourishing, delicious, filling, but clean soup. So it's a tomato and butter bean soup. We use fresh tomatoes and a can of butter beans, or any bean that you've got. But it's a particularly great one if you're someone who works late shifts. So chefs are notorious, as well as obviously musicians and actors and all sorts of performers, for coming home at 2 in the morning and making pasta with tomato sauce out of a can. I promise this will take even less time than doing that and will be far more nutritious and delicious. And you can use any can of beans, which I know that everyone who panicked and ran out and bought tinned goods will have plenty of cans of beans that they now have no idea what to do with. So I'll show you how to do that. And then we're going to make something called pasta not pasta, which again is something that is quick, easy, nutritious, light, and it looks like pasta, but it's not. And it's really delicious, beautiful dish.